all. This is Dr. Mobeen Sayed from drbeen.com. Welcome to one more show. So let's have a chit chat today that gives me the privilege that I do not have to prepare before, and so I could spend time with my family. So tell me, how is everything? What can we talk about today? The yesterday's talks, one about the spike protein and the other one, the chit chat, they I was, to my surprise, mostly were appreciated. Some folks were not able to figure it out, and their commentary was that somehow I am under censorship or um, under some paid structure, and that is why I cannot say things against vaccine. And it is such a sad thing that there are people who have made so much, they have created so much of deception around the level of benefit and level of harm, that there is one group that only believes vaccines can do nothing but benefit, and then there is another group that believes that vaccines can do nothing but harm, and there is no other choice. So so the there was one sad thing that I got, and I would request that patient to come join us one day. But there is a patient who is vaccine injured and severely injured, and some part of their, I'm intentionally not saying he or she, so some part of their treatment is covered by insurance, which has finally refused as well. And the insurance has said to them, while refusing coverage, so I have the text here, they told them that they did not, because they cannot work for at least 10 hours per week to stay on the insurance, and they did not prove the causation of the vaccine injury, and that the official mandates still did not mean that they had to have the vaccine. So even after the proof of the request for mandate for government employees, the insurance came back and said, so did you still have to have it? It was still your choice. And then um, what is tragic further, so after they dropped that person, what is tragic is that, do you know that lawyers are not helping them? Lawyers do not want to take up this case. So imagine that person's frustration. Okay, anyways, um, I will request them to come join us someday and discuss this. Let's see. So what should we talk about today? Butterfly says, just found long story short episodes on Odyssey. Let me actually show you. Somebody was saying, what is the other um, YouTube account? So let's see, YouTube long story short with Dr. Bean. I'm going to bring this to this screen here. Then I'm going to share my screen. So if you see here, this is, if you search for YouTube long story short with Dr. Bean, and these are, if you look at these um, videos, damaged protein recycling for management of inflammatory disease, anti-nuclear antibodies, spikopathy, spike proteins, and the nitric oxide disruption, near infrared light, when the RNA won't go away, how to maximize autophagy, unexpected symptoms found to be risk factor for long COVID, and coffee induces long COVID, and so on. So there are a bunch of very good discussions, and I have recorded some more. Even I recorded one today as well, which will be brought up soon. So this is on YouTube. So these are on Odyssey, but these are also on YouTube. So, John, the problem with this patient is that they are not able to work. And so so insurance has simply said, you know what, go away. And that is such a tragic thing to do. What is the purpose of insurance? Salfala says, so do you think COVID will continue to get milder? Of course, it has become milder and it will become milder. Okay, so this is a this is a good one. Kira Shem says, Dr. Bean, can you rank your favorite interventions? Masks, avoidance, nasal rinsing. I know you used Cofix, but did you mask or avoid as well? So, very interesting question. Here is why. For about 2 years, I stayed safe. I used to go to the first 6 months of the lockdowns, I didn't go anywhere. Then I started going to the Starbucks, but I will have a mask on and then I would wash my hands with the sanitizers and I will spray the coffee cup and everything, meaning I'll do a lot of things. And I stayed safe. Then 2 years later, the very first time, and meanwhile I got vaccinated as well. So 2 years later, the very first time I became infected after accidentally licking the pencil at the post office. um, anyway, so that was stupid, but that is what I did, and I got the infection. After that, the I kept going to Starbucks because I had infection, I had vaccines, and I would not wear mask, I would not do anything, and I'll get infected again and again. So then, when I went for the FLCCC board meeting, I wore a mask and I became sick on the way back. So since then, I have only used the nasal spray. So either I'm lucky that I'm not getting the infection anymore, or if I'm getting, I'm asymptomatic because I've gotten it so many times now that my body is like, whatever. Or Cofix is doing a lot of good work. For me, what is most interesting for Cofix is that by this time, I used to become sick and start getting common cold like things. And on the very first hint of common cold, I just use Cofix and I become okay. So if it is psychosomatic, it is a really good psychosomatic thing. So if you asked me today that you can have just one of these things, then I'll just take the nasal spray. That's just for me. Cyber Nurse says, love that nasal spray. Yes, me too. Okay, so what else is happening? Colombian Coffee Bean says, my vax injured friend also has had insurance refuse to pay for most of her treatments. She has spent thousands of dollars out of pocket. I can imagine. So for my wife, I had to spend out of pocket because her doctor refused to say that this is, or agree that this is vaccine injury. That also prevented him from reporting to VAERS. I didn't do it, and we did out of pocket. Fortunate for us that she became okay with just low dose naltrexone. But there are people who are going through a lot of prevent interventions, and these are very expensive interventions. Lilji says, "Who is licking pens?" It was me. Yes, yes. Kim says, who licks pens? Yes. So this has been a going around joke for the whole year, and I invoked it again. Last day says accidentally. Okay, so in my defense, I actually made a video about it. I became really angry because the clerk at the post office would keep asking me to go back and write this and write that, and he won't tell me once to do this. So after the fifth time, when he asked me to go and do this, I just went in and picked up the pen and did it. And I had to change the paper, and I just did this and changed it. And I think that is what got me in trouble. So, yes, you're all good for making fun of me. Yes. So, look, what have I done? And Vicky, thank you very much for the super sticker. Dr. Bean Pens. I actually made a video about it. It has been a running joke for a long time. Colombian says nasal spray good, as Barney says nip it in the bud. Yes. Also, I saw one more thing. This is such an interesting thing. A few days ago in the YouTube shorts, a doctor, his video popped up. Of course, it was 1 minute or lesser. And he said, let me tell you a very effective way to decongest your nose. And he held his nose here at the bridge, the bone. He held it here, and I said, man, this is going to be some quack thingy. He looked very decent doctor, but when he did this, I said, oh man, this is going to be quackery. But anyways, here is what he did. He said, hold it here firmly, do not put lots of pressure, and then at the at this part of the nose, push it upwards. So I said, this is totally prank. He's going to have people laugh at you doing this thing. But I was a little congested and I did it. And it works like magic. It really causes, and I can understand. I think what it does is mechanically, one, it opens, it stretches the sinus openings in the nose. And secondly, the mucosa of the nose, when you hold it here and push it up, that mucosa gets rinsed, or like you do that to the clothes, so it gets squeezed and it becomes decongested. So that was interesting. So try that sometimes. Okay, so Stephen 7 star says, can you talk more about the spike protein and long COVID? So I have done this discussion before as well, and John, thank you very much. Yes, you're correct. So I've done this discussion before as well. I did that yesterday as well. And that brought in some people who were really upset with me. And there were some who said, thank you very much for doing this discussion. Anyways, we like the outcome of your discussion or not, but good discussion. The question that is interesting is, can the spike protein or the virus live in us for a long time? And there are very few studies that show the possibility of these to be present. For example, Dr. Bruce Patterson's study. It is so funny that sometimes people come and teach me that there is a doctor, his name is Bruce Patterson, and he has this. They used the term yesterday, colonization of monocytes. So that is one study, Bruce's study, and Bruce's study was actually for COVID. And then he extrapolated that to say, if it happens for COVID, maybe this happens for vaccine as well. And I can understand that if the monocyte end up with the spike protein S1 part and they cannot digest it or take care of it, or the S1 causes their internal inflammatory and stress management systems to be turned off, then it comes from spike protein or it comes from COVID or the vaccine, it would be okay. Although important thing to keep in mind is that, as I discussed yesterday, the spikes structure, open versus closed, are different. So I do not think if Bruce has ever said that this is an closed format S1 versus open. And the reason that these can be different is that if spike protein is going to modulate nuclear factor K beta pathway, which is the inflammatory and stress management pathway, then is it the open spike that does it, or is it some other enzymes of the SARS-CoV-2 that do it, or is it the close as well? I do not know. So that is one study. Then there are studies that say that SARS-CoV-2 itself can be in our tissues. So we know that immunosuppressed or immunocompromised can have it for years. But even in healthy individuals, they know that at least in the gut tissue, it can be there for 90 days or more. So the question really, so if I go back to the long COVID part of it, the question to answer is the following. Is the long COVID because of the spike's presence, or because of the pathologies that we are seeing, regardless of what is causing it? And I have a reason for saying this. Autoimmune diseases or anti-idiotypical antibodies that I've discussed many times, they can do what spike does, and they are produced again and again, and they can be produced for autoimmune diseases, and some people are for lifelong. And then not only this, the antibodies that we produce cause biological actions as well. And as I discussed yesterday, let me just very quickly draw this. So as much as folks are upset that I say it may not be the spike and that is because I am under censorship or others, it's really medicine that we should be talking about. So here is, let's say, spike, right? So this spike has, let's say this is S1 and this is S2. And we discussed this. So this is the point to capture. We discussed this yesterday. That's a part of the spike S1. Remember, there are three parts. Is called the receptor binding domain, correct? We know this all. Then on the receptor binding domain, there is an actual part that interacts with the ACE2 that is called receptor binding motif. We saw that yesterday, that receptor binding motif is up to 20 amino acid, actually 17 amino acids long on the spike side and about 20 amino acid long on the ACE2 side. Why is this the most important thing to keep in mind? Here is why. The 17 amino acids are such a small length that they can easily be one epitope. An epitope is the binding region. So let's say we have an antibody. This binding region can be anywhere from 5 to 12 or even up to 22, depending upon which kind of cell we are talking about. This is the binding region. So let's make it into antibody. So if the cell is T cell, then this would be called a T cell receptor. If the cell is a B cell, then this is an antibody. And they have a different epitope size, but usually 12, 14 is possible. Here we are talking about 17, not too far away, the 12 or 14, right? So that means if we make an antibody that binds with the receptor binding motif and then make an antibody against this antibody, then that antibody will look like receptor binding motif. And if it looks like receptor binding motif, it would behave like that as well, because the size is very similar to the receptor binding motif's size. Structure is of course going to be similar because it is an antibody which is going to be very similar to the shape of original antigen. Now, this anti-antibody or anti-idiotypical antibody, as we call that, let me make it in red. This antibody can bind with ACE2, can do everything that a spike can do after binding with the ACE2. And on top of this, it can cause immune complex formation and inflammatory system activation, complement system activation, local inflammatory responses. This antibody can bind in the endothelium. It can bind in heart. It can bind anywhere in the body. It can cause joint pains. It can cause muscle pains. It can cause issues with the neuromuscular junctions as well. It is an autoantibody. This is what I was trying to explain yesterday, that instead of just hunting for spike protein to be present somewhere, we should keep focusing on the autoimmune part of it. And honestly, the management is going to look very similar, because imagine we have a spike protein. Let's say we go with the idea that spike protein is being produced forever for some reason. Let's go with two school of thoughts, SARS-CoV-2 school of thought with the resident virus, and vaccine side, or people not liking the vaccine side, saying that the mRNA living in the cells forever and producing the spikes forever. At the end of the day, you will have to manage the immune system's response, because the damage that is occurring is going to be ACE2 damage, correct? ACE2 binding damage, and then the remaining is the immune system response. Here, the damage because of the antibody is very similar, binding to ACE2 plus the inflammatory response. So how are you going to help it? Intermittent fasting needed for both. Immune modulation needed for both. Any ACE2 prevention, binding prevention, needed for both. So that means before you even find out what is really underneath where the fire is coming from, the management to reduce the damage is going to be the same. Then, sure, by all means, figure out, is it spike, or is it anti-ACE2 antibody, or is it something else? Maybe ANAs, maybe dysregulated mast cells, mast cell activation syndrome, maybe dysregulated macrophages, maybe memory B cells sitting in the bone marrow. I have discussed them all. So to me, at this stage, where people are suffering with the long COVID, this seems like a distraction for people to say, well, if we're going to talk about long COVID, we have to first agree that this happened because of vaccine. Or saying that if we're going to talk about long COVID, then we have to agree that vaccines cannot do it and it is infection that is doing it. These kind of, if we agree with one, so let's say we say, yeah, sure, vaccine did it. Now what? It will not magically become okay. The solution still is going to be what I'm talking about here. And many more. There are so many pathologies that we still do not know. And similarly, if we say, fine, it is not vaccine, it is COVID, still the answer is going to be in the similar management. So I hope that answers that question, that this is very similar to when the vaccine started causing clotting, or when we found out that vaccines can cause clotting, and a presenter said, well, this is, the vaccine in the blood. And all of a sudden, uh, majority of the population dropped the idea that the vaccine could be causing molecular mimicry and resulting in autoantibodies, which are causing platelet factor 4 activation, which are causing clotting. And everybody was like, you know what? Yeah, this is the vaccine going into the veins. And we moved away from the basic problem that needed to be solved. I feel there is a similar um, discourse going on where this seems to be the only solution to Okay, can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Okay, so I'm going to hang up because this whole 20 minutes is wasted because there was no sound and I did not see it. I'm going to hang up and then come back again and I would delete this video. Was it 10 seconds or more? Okay. So it looks like when I was working on this drawing board, the buttons on the side, I think some button got accidentally pushed to mute the mic. Okay, then I'll leave this one. Okay, so how many unsubs? Did you see that how many unsubs I have gotten with my latest talks? I think about 3 or 4 thousand unsubscriptions. I am actually trying to go down. My system is going down towards negative subscriptions. That is more leaving than coming in. But it would be such a shame on me if I continue to not continue, if I cannot present the actual pathologies. And we still do not know a lot of pathologies. So much is going to be revealed. But at least what we have, we should be able to. For example, this study with the uh, mother's breast milk having messenger RNA in it. I did a discussion about that. I actually did two discussions about it. In one discussion, I discussed the study. In the second discussion, I did a chit chat to discuss what does it mean. It would mean that sweat can have it, or saliva can have it, or shedding can occur. And folks were telling me yesterday that you don't even know that the spike protein is found in the breast milk, and because of this you know nothing. So there were just very strange dialogues. I have discussed that. Now if you think about it, the spike protein present in messenger RNA present in the breast milk, that that is a very interesting thing, and I discussed it before as well. Let me say that once more. Presence of messenger RNA, and I have to make sure I'm not muted again. Presence of messenger RNA in the breast milk is not a proof that broken RNA arrived. And I'll explain why. I explained it before too. And secondly, presence of messenger RNA in the breast milk can actually indicate that there were spike proteins as well. And here is why. Let me share my screen, and we know that messenger RNA is inside the lipid nanoparticle, correct? The point of lipid nanoparticle is to help messenger RNA cross a cell's lipid membrane, phospholipid or bilayer of a cell. So there is a double lipid phospholipid membrane. So the point of this lipid nanoparticle, this outer covering, is to allow this RNA to get into the cell. This also means that if we do not have the lipid on the RNA, then RNA cannot cross into the cell. Right? So I hope so far it makes sense. Now, when the lipid nanoparticle is present, then RNA will go into a cell. If lipid nanoparticle is not present and RNA has come out, this RNA will be present in the local fluids, which we call lymph, but this RNA cannot get into the cell. So what will this RNA do? This RNA will be picked up by the immune system cells and they would destroy it. There are actually enzymes, nucleases enzymes, that are present in these tissues as well that would break it down. Point. The point is, it is impossible for this RNA to float all the way from the muscle, deltoid muscle, to uh, breast tissue all the way and enter a breast tissue cell, because if it can enter a cell RNA, then it would have entered somewhere else as well, wherever it is present, which means it is actually understandable that a full lipid nanoparticle arrived here and delivered the RNA by going into the breast tissue cell and then gave the RNA here. And if that happened, if this happened, I'm trying to see if I can increase the size. I really do not like that my drawing board broke. Okay, so when it gets into the cell, when the lipid nanoparticle goes in, it will bring the whole mRNA in there. That would mean the spike protein will be formed. And we have done this discussion that the milk is formed by the interior 1/3 of the cell breaking off. That would bring the mRNA in it, that would bring the spikes in it, and that would bring the remaining content of the cells as well. So this is something I discussed. And yes, it should be seen further that if this can happen, then sweat can have it. If sweat can have it, then it is possible that saliva may have it too, although salivary production is slightly different from sweat. So, anyways, Nipa says, Dr. Bean should try this method. Subscriptions will increase. Please let him know. Okay. There is a method. So usually they start a topic in YouTube and they announce the rest will be talked about in Rumble and Odyssey. Yeah. So Hillary says, you did not say spike in milk, only mRNA. Yes, I remember. And the reason is that the study, I actually discussed it as well. The study did not talk about spike at all. They only said mRNA. And I remember I made a comment that if the mRNA was present, I am sure that if they looked for spike, they would have found it because messenger RNA was there. However, staying loyal to the study, I could not say that there was a spike. Study said there was mRNA. So we had to stop there as well. And I explained it very carefully then as well in my discussion that this is my addition, that if messenger RNA has arrived in the cell, then the spike will be formed. But study didn't say it. So, how are things? Patty says, have you read the study about a pollution particle, PM 2.5, causing the frequent rise in heart attack in young people? Can you have you done? I have not, but I will. Can you send this out in Discord and to me in a message? So, Hillary, the other thing is when they said mRNA present, and I did this discussion as well, that the researchers said we are not sure the total amount secreted in 48 hours. They said it was up to 45 hours that we saw. After that, we didn't see it. So that's one. Second, they said we do not know exactly how much amount will be secreted in 45 hours. So the American Pediatric Association then came out and said after the vaccination of a mother that is breastfeeding, 48 hours should be, they should be careful. Now, what should be the care? And I did this discussion as well that maybe if the child gets mRNA with, so mother's milk, because it is one third of the cell pinched off, it will have many mRNAs of our own tissue as well. For child, that is a foreign tissue, foreign molecule. So I don't think child is going to do anything to that mRNA. One second, the even if this is spike, and I remember I said it's like a dot on a spoon. So what does that really mean for a child? Mucosal membranes and digestive system, that dot will be digested away. But the guidance that came was be careful 48 hours. That was a very neutral, non-specific, non-prescriptive guidance. So anyways, is there a Luffy here? Yeah. So Luffy is here. I'm gonna see if I can bring him. Okay, so we have Luffy. Luffy ran away. One second. He's totally not happy to be here. Luffy. Okay, he doesn't want to be here. One second. Let me get him out. Okay. Luffy decided not to be here. Okay. So where were we at? Yes, Kairi is actually more beautiful than Luffy. That is true. Hi, Luffy, and bye, Luffy. No, so that howling cat is this Luffy Bengal. So I have two Bengals, Luffy and Kairi. Okay. Meanwhile, in America says both antivirals and H1H2 blockers are helping my long COVID symptoms. Based on that, which theory would you conclude for LC? So that will be viral persistence if antiviral is helping. because antiviral is going to be taking care of the viral replication. And H1, H2 blockers are the secondary effect. So, of course, inflammation is superimposed. So, this from you, this will be viral persistence in the probably in the gut tissue. If you reach out to Dr. Bruce Patterson and get your monocytes tested for S1 or your tissue for virus, that will be very interesting. So, this is a good question. Viral persistence in everyone or long COVID cases. Those who have immune issues, meaning their immune system is not overactive, but is instead underactive, either suppressed or compromised, they can have virus without any symptoms. But other than that, there are some people without any symptoms and still being healthy could be carrying the virus as well. But that is for 90 days, is what is proven so far. So the question that is it in everyone, I don't think it is in everyone, but it may be also not only just who have the symptoms. Okay, heard. Kim in Nature says Bengal. Yes. So both Luffy and Kyrie are Bengals. There was a study by William A. Hasseltine of how 16 of the 30 SARS-CoV-2 viral proteins actively block or interfere with interferon signaling and initiation of innate immunity. So I have done this discussion as well, and especially the spike protein and some of the viral proteins or enzymes are able to change the nuclear factor kappa B pathway that turns off the stress management system of the cell and causes the virus to kind of be happy. And of course, the interferon blockage has been along, we studied that in the early days of COVID. So, yes. Kim in Nature says, is vascular inflammation, long COVID is vascular inflammation with poor oxygen transfer? Long COVID can depend upon where the tissue damage is occurring. Vascular component is a part. Thank you, Paul. Good night. Keeney says, let's see if I can. I'm not a medical professional, but my two COVID-19 infections manifested in severe GIT, no lung. Could part of investigating LC be based on what part of the AS2 was hit hardest? Yes. So 4% of the population gets nothing but GIT issues. And so, yes, that may cause the virus to live longer. Virus can live longer in GIT regardless of where it appeared, but in some people it could be more as well. Correct. So for those concerned about vaccine injury, would you say autoimmunity should be there? Correct. So this is where I think we should be focusing. The focus is on, is mRNA there forever? Is spike protein being created forever? I think we are losing focus on what is actually happening, and that is autoimmune autoantibodies being produced. And I wanted to discuss this. I'll do it next week. But I have a text here, As you can tell, both patients and doctors send me texts. This is an interesting text from a doctor, and he sent me a study where, so I have this with me here. This was, they said that 80% of the patients, of COVID patients, have anti ACE2 antibodies. I would suspect a similar number with the vaccine as well will develop that. And if the anti ACE2 antibodies are present in 80% of the patients, you can imagine how that autoimmunity will cause a problem, because anti-ACE2 antibodies are not only antibodies that will make immune complexes that would cause the inflammatory responses, but anti-ACE2 antibodies will bind with ACE2 and cause ACE2 related issues as well. And so this doctor was discussing with me that cell trend um, is very expensive. It is $1,200. So to be able to confirm if somebody has NTS2, then to treat them, that's a very expensive uh, solution. And my comment was that if 80% have it, then maybe everyone should be managed as if they have anti-ACE2 antibodies or this autoimmune antibody problem. And then if somebody doesn't have it, we should look for something else instead of getting everyone tested for anti-ACE2. So Mrs. Puffington says, would you consider reaching out to some content creators to clear the fog? Uh, what fog, and who, which content creators? Sorry, I didn't catch the question. So Selfala has a very good question. How could vaccinated have ACE2 antibodies when vax spike doesn't bind to ACE2? So here, it's actually a good question. We did this discussion yesterday, so that links are present in yesterday's talks, that the 2p format of this closed state, so let's say this is spike and this is closed, right? That's what we discussed. And there is a 2p lock here, 2p lock. As we saw that in some cases, this can bloom. And the reasons they said this could bloom are few. Number one, when this spike is produced, it could actually be produced without the lock. When our ribosomes are working and they are making the new proteins, sometimes they create damaged protein, if you will. And so if they have gotten this lock incorrect, then the spike will be produced with the bloomed or open state. That's one. The second is, even if it is produced with the 2p lock, there is a percentage of spike, which I believe it was about 3% or so. There's a percentage of spike that blooms anyways. So when they make these spikes, in this group of spikes, there were some in that study, there were some that were fully locked. And then there was a small ratio where one RBD was up. And there was another tiny ratio where two RBDs were up. So there can be some spikes that have the open state. Thirdly, if the spike batch, which will not happen with mRNA, but if there is a spike that is packaged, and if that spike blooms because of temperature variation, then we have a spike that is bloomed spike. So, and the fourth thing that I said yesterday as well, which was from the study for HexaPro study, which I showed yesterday. So if you look for Hexa, HEXAPRO, you can actually read it in their study. In the Hexapro study, they said there could be other dynamics. I'm paraphrasing them. There could be other dynamics that would allow the 2p to fail and the spike to open. So, can the spike open? Yes. Can it open like we have SARS-CoV-2 produce spikes that are always open? That is probably not going to be the case. Then, when we are recycling the spike, could we end up with the pieces? Remember, when we create antigen presentation, we break down pieces of things. So, could we end up with the tiny piece broken, which is of the receptor binding motif, and then presented it, and that causes the immune system to respond to it? Yes. So there are possibilities of that. And this is why you don't see this in everyone. Some people end up with this issue. Vin says, thank you for answering so thoroughly, and Jen, you're very welcome. Okay, so what is next? Golden Time says, asking out of curiosity, every time I got a respiratory infection, my fever goes up at around 102. Even in COVID-19, it was 104. Is it possible that I've any innate condition? No, it is just that you get bacterial infection superimposed as well. That happens to a lot of people. And some people actually respond to COVID with high grade fevers. Kira says, it seemed like you were headed for long COVID with all the reinfections you were getting. Yes. Is that true? And if so, did Keith do anything specific to help you avoid viral persistence, GI issues, or long COVID? So Keith did not, but Dr. Zaharakis, he said to me, he said, so for next 3 months now, make sure that you keep taking. I still remember his words were, you seem to be handling it very well, but for next 3 months, make sure that you keep taking quercetin and anti-allergies and anti-inflammatories and milk thistle and some other things that he thought I should take them. He said keep taking them. I can actually read them if you like. I'll just have to find them. So let's see. So flavonoids. So he's a fan of emmentoflavone. That is one. Then he said, okay, so I cannot find where he. We've exchanged so many texts that I cannot really just very quickly find them. Um, okay, I'll publish them some other time. I'm gonna be wasting your time looking for this another time. But what I remember is quercetin and curcumin and anti-allergies. So I have actually taken them. Yes, and I do take NSC as well. I take milk thistle. I take NMN. I take curcumin. Of course, vitamin D, quercetin, and a multivitamin, calcium, magnesium, zinc. Travers says, what if I was asymptomatic with COVID when I got vaccinated? Would that possibly explain my long haul symptoms from the vax? I can see no difference between the two. Mm, we have been discussing this, that vaccine injury and the long COVID, they look very similar. So could it be the COVID? Vaccine alone can do that as well. And maybe if they both are present, that can do it too. Okay, so okay to let go says this haunting question about quercetin that Dr. Merrick let out of the bottle regarding it's not comfortable with synthroid. Yes, so yes, it does. If somebody is on thyroid related medications, then quercetin isn't the right. It actually modulates, so one has to calibrate the doses. So golden, I have to actually read about the natokinase. Haven't yet. Yes, so Sulfala, I do take the supplements every other day, and Doug has been asking me to talk about it. I haven't found my original research theory that I read to do this, but it is said that every other day allows your body to stay reactive uh, to the vitamins and supplements, and if you are getting them every day, then your body starts becoming more accustomed to them. Is there a science that puts the COVID vaccine in a negative light? That is, so look, I read this patient's messages that insurance would not help, not cover. And when they said it is vaccine related, first they did not agree. When the doctor also said, yes, it is vaccine related, then they simply said, why did you take it? So there is anomalous behavior, which is not really beneficial. I do not know what is the benefit of behaving this way. Instead of saying, yes, vaccine is causing injury in some people and they need help and we are working on it, and here are the studies and here are how to help and here are the guidelines. It's just sad. And the result of that lack of leadership is that then people are just fighting with each other. You can see afterwards this video or my video from yesterday and just the comments in there. So DR says, I would be interested to hear Dr. Bean speak about the lymphatic system versus the endocrine glands and their role in. Okay. So maybe as part of the immune system book that I'm writing and lectures that I'm doing, I'll cover this. So Sean says, is ACQ a complete substitute for quercetin? No. Quercetin is a one of the actions of quercetin is to act as a vehicle to allow hydroxy to enter the cells, but they have separate reactions or actions. Yes, so quercetin is actually in many of the red skinned foods and fruits and vegetables. Sat says, do antibody tests have any value whatsoever in determining if to take another booster or not? So I'm guessing you're talking about the vaccine generated antibodies, SARS-CoV-2 antibodies, and not the ANAs or others, right? So generally, if the antibody titers are higher than the cutoff, I believe 11 international IAUs is the cutoff for research, but there is actually no consensus on what level is protective. Because of that, they really cannot say what antibody level will be good for you. So doing that test is interesting, um, but then interpretation of that test and the reaction to that is not solid. So JS says, do you have any thoughts on the nitric oxide spray? So I did a detailed discussion. Actually, let me see if I can find it for you. These discussions were done so long in the past. So if I say Dr. Bean nasal spray, look at these discussions. This is the nitric oxide spray discussion 1 year ago. Then nasal COVID vaccine, that was different. Um, oh, this was the one. This doctor was the one who said, press your nose. He is the one. He is motivation, motivational doc. Look at his views. He's good. Okay, so back here, nasal spray. This is the one about sanitized nasal spray from Canada 1 year ago. And I have discussed the study. This is another one about the nitric oxide, uh, which I discussed. And this was my own experience. And then this was a comparison of various nasal sprays, including nitric oxide. Dude Daisy says, I am still going through long COVID. I'm sorry about that. I recovered from COVID in July and going through long COVID, though I'm getting much better. So fingers crossed you would continue to recover. July, yeah, you'll recover. So Sulfla says, I want to view all of your videos again. Do you have an index with links? So I was talking with someone. Um, I am not permitted to have these videos on my site because of some people complaining. Although we won it, but one uh, discussion point was that I would not move these videos to drbeen.com. But I think there is a benefit in indexing them. So I might stand up another separate site where I would just index them. But at this time, there is nothing. And that makes it very difficult for people to see. And they would come to me and they'll say, do you know this? For example, they still believe I have never talked to Dr. Bruce Patterson or FLCCC and so on. So it may be useful to put them somewhere together, especially the long COVID videos. So I'll see if I can stand up another site. It all it comes to time and cost to do that, and I'll see if I can. Anthony says there are spike antibody serology tests, but are these tests to determine whether the actual spike is present? No. So antibody in the beginning will be against a spike. When there was some spike present, then the antibody was there. But then spike could have gone and the antibodies can live on for longer time. So presence of antibody at one point is indication of the antigen present, and then at another point it is not. And we what we do is we do this. If IgM is present and IgG is present, then we say it is acute and the original antigen is present as well, and the um, antibodies are there. But if IgM is not present and IgG is present, then usually that means antigen is gone, body is just now making the antibodies. How long does it take to recover from long COVID? I'm still having heart issues after COVID 2 years ago. That is so sad. I'm so sorry about that. Um, so if people don't do anything, I have heard people recovering in a year, year and a half, or months. In the case of my own family member, they had to take LDN, and the recovery took about a year. So it depends what um, if you are taking just symptomatic treatments or actually there are managements of the underlying pathology as well. But you will recover. I can't guarantee anything, but I feel that most of the long COVID patients continue to recover. Lilji says, can you talk about the 6 months follow up study after the fourth dose of the COVID vaccine that Israel did? Okay, I'll check it out. The woman who had offered a pile of dollars to someone who could help her, if she's here, she could offer to, I think so. Yeah, the one who was saying, I could have given $1 million. Golden Time says that one of the studies say that COVID can infect T cells independent of the AS2 via the lymphocyte. Yes, so it is known in a. I have read that study that it can cause the T cell infection like HIV. But the thing is, I always say look at the empirical evidence as well. How many COVID patients have actually become HIV patients or HIV like patients or immunocompromised patients? HIV did it almost to everyone. So COVID is it is seen in some studies to infect the T cells, but luckily it's not the primary pathology that it causes. Otherwise we would have all been in trouble. This would be a pandemic of, imagine pandemic of HIV, and with the respiratory system virus will be in a very bad shape. Sean, thank you very much. So Sulfla says, what is the mechanism of action of so the answers are here. So if you go here and say Dr. Bean and say NAC, N-acetylcysteine, treatment options, etc. So I have discussed it. When did I do it? 2 years ago. So I'm not being facetious. I'm just showing that there are things that I've done which can be interesting to look at, and I would try to answer as well. So Sad says, what do I know about the Cuban COVID vaccine? Nothing. I have not looked at that. Sulfala says, my 21-year-old son, thrice vaccinated, never had COVID, last vax on 12/21, has been having recurring ear infections in both ears. Do you think he needs to get the auto antibodies tested? No, so last vaccine was 12/21. This is almost end of 22. I don't think it has anything to do with the vaccine. If you want to test it, that's a different thing. Anti-nuclear antibodies and anti-ACE2. I do not know. Um, Anti-nuclear are cheaper to get, I think, anywhere from $60-$70 to $300. But the anti-ACE2 is $1,200. So if it makes you feel comfortable, do it. But the time, if between that December 21 until now, there was no other pathology, then it may not be the spike. Kira says, so sorry, I dropped avocado on my iPad screen and hit dislike by accident. Very good. Thank you for letting us know. Rest in peace, avocado. Yes. Follow up. Should we consider the spike antibody problematic and inflammatory as well? Any way to flush that out of the system? So, yes, spike, when present, is inflammatory. It actually causes the tilting of the inflammation. So, if you see here, I talked about it. This is like Apple saying we got an app about for this. So, spike protein. Just look at this spike. Here is how spike protein causes vascular damage. Spike protein destroys mitochondria. Spike protein spills in the blood of the vaccinated. Then spike versus SARS-CoV-2 spike, etc. So there are many spike protein discussions I've done. So if I go here to your question, how to flush it out, I have discussed that as well, that intermittent fasting, spermidine, resveratrol, there are, if you look at FLCCC, you'll see a lot of possibilities to how to help. Those folks who say that I'll sell you a detox, that I don't think there is any detox. The only thing we can do is, if spike is sitting around in monocytes or other cells, then possibly intermittent fasting or um, encouragement of autophagy can help clean out the cells. And autophagy is a normal mechanism. We just have to encourage it. It happens all the time. It's not that autophagy is stopped, it's always there. But we can encourage that further with intermittent fasting or coffee or resveratrol or spermidine. There are many such possibilities. These would help. In addition to that, this is very important. So if a provider is a medical doctor, nurse, NP, PA, are there listening, look, when you are trying to clean the cell, but the patient has inflammatory state going, then triggering autophagy will become a problem. Cells will not do autophagy if they are in the inflammatory state. So you have to calm down the inflammation and then encourage autophagy. So that means anti-inflammatory and immune modulators, immune balancers have to be given to bring the immune system to a calmful state symptomatically, then perform the autophagy so that the cells can actually clean up themselves. Or I shouldn't say this, that they can clean, they're always cleaning up themselves. They can do more cleaning. Lord Crunk, good name. Can a custom mRNA vax be loaded with my original DNA and override the COVID-19 vax changes? So, number one, COVID-19 vax does not do anything to DNA. And number two, custom vax to do that, that will be a CRISPR technology to do gene editing. That is a very expensive thing to do. I don't, I haven't heard of a vaccine that can do it. And as much as people say that this vaccine does it, it doesn't. Susan, FDA knows bunches. Okay, so how does, dude says, how does vaccine induced immunity have superior than natural immunity? I hear this at times. So, first, it is not correct. And this is, once again, if you see, there are going to be studies, and I have discussed them, that show that vaccine is superior, and I have discussed that show natural infection is superior. Although, if you look at today's contemporary time with all the variations, I don't think vaccine now has that superiority because the efficacy and durability has gone down, and the comparison to the virus, that infection is not as severe, so the risk benefit analysis is up in the air now. Having said that, I think your question is mostly to try to understand that is there a possibility that vaccine causes superior immunity? The only reason could be, if at all, is that vaccine is more specific towards the receptor binding domain and receptor binding motifs, although they're locked, or towards the spike protein in the locked state, so our antibodies can attack that and as soon as the virus comes in. So very specific antibodies compared to if the virus is present, and we'll make antibodies that are for its M protein and N protein and RNA and the uh, spike and various parts of the spike. But I haven't yet seen any conclusive evidence that one is better than the other. There are tons of studies that say one is better, and there are tons of studies that say the other. So I would consider that I don't think we can call one better than the other. Lord Crunk says my journey begins. Okay, so with this, Patricia says, great discussion. I hope this was valuable. I hope I did not take my time away from my wife's birthday and then wasted your time. Okay, let's see if I can answer these questions quickly and then we hang up. Heidi says, can spike cause arrhythmias that last even 18 months after vaccine? So, see, that is not the spike, but that is autoantibodies. Let me back up for a second. Let's look at the source of spike, either the vaccine or the SARS-CoV-2, or maybe a combination of both. What we are saying is that somehow from vaccine, the spike has to be there for 18 months. That's a difficult thing to do. Or we are saying that SARS-CoV-2 will be there for 18 months. And I have repeated it many times that if somebody is immunosuppressed or compromised, for them to have the SARS-CoV-2 hide in them without any symptoms and without their immune system reacting to them is possible in healthy patients? No. So then 18 months later, what could be causing it? It is going to be immune system. This is why, for once again, for doctors, please start with controlling the immune system, then finding the real reason, and that is a couple of weeks of steroids and then other modulators to bring the immune system back home, and then trying to figure out what is it. Meanwhile, in America says, if there is COVID virus present in GIT after the incel test, do we even have anything available to treat it? This is a very good discussion. And this is what Dr. Paul Marik says it very often, that fine, you did the test, now what? So if you are always going to come back to, let's say, FLCCC protocol, then why not just do that protocol? So I believe in that eventually that is the answer. This question of testing becomes more interesting when these protocols are not working. Then it is worth going after the pathology to see what is going on so that we can think about how do we handle it here now. John says, Dr. Bean, my latest vitamin D level was 57. Very good. Is that a good level to be at for any future potential COVID infection? What about potential RSV infection? So I think this is a good level for both. We know that the Iranian study that came out that said 39 and above had reduced the risk of severe cases in the hospitalized patient from 6 to, I believe, 1.5 or 2. So it was such a drastic difference, and that was 39 and above. So you are at 57. That is a very good thing. And even for RSV, this is not a detrimental level. So this is a good level. I wish I had that. So one more question. Could COVID-19 vaccination make a pre-existing low-level persistent COVID viral infection visible? No. Vaccination would actually cause the virus to become eradicated, because what will happen, imagine I have some tissues where the virus is sitting, and look, virus cannot sit in a cell forever. It has to keep replicating, then come out of the cell, then go into the next cell. The cells are going to show the presentation. And when we say the virus is just sitting there, the carrier states, for example hepatitis, there we don't react to the virus. Or states like EBV, where the genetic information of the virus is in the cell, but the virus itself is not. So imagine if this is a virus that is present and doing things slowly and we are not reacting. You give the vaccine would cause the immune system to start making antibodies and reacting to the virus. And whatever little virus is sitting, that would get cleared out. And that is also the similar way that people who get vaccine injured, sometimes they say that after infection I felt better, because the infection creates the antibodies that clear out those antibodies. So this is going to be difficult, that vaccine would poke the virus to become more visible. I There was a doctor, I think it was Tenpenny, who had popularized this concept that your DNA would become modified by the vaccine, if I recall it correctly. And then when the actual infection would appear, then your immune system would react to your cells and kill them. So your message seems to be a little in the reverse of that, but that doesn't happen. Okay, so danger zone says, does spike cause cardiomyelitis? So spike itself can cause cardiomyelitis or myocarditis, right? And spike and antibodies both can do it. So butterfly says, can SARS-CoV-2 hide in the body like HSV-1? So it is still not known. The studies that are coming out that says for 2 years, that is for immunocompromised or immunosuppressed. In healthy patients, it is still not known. The only longer term sitting of the virus is observed in GIT. First, it was 59 days, now it is 90 days and above. So, haven't seen it to be for people to become carriers like HSV or hepatitis. Marsha says, Tenpenny says we have 2 years. Well, now we are beyond 2 years, remember? First, she had said that by March of 21, we all would start dying. And then people said, well, where are the people dying? She said, well, are you doing those autopsies? And now, then she became wise and she said, well, 3 years later. And we are reaching there as well. I don't think there is anything. Svetlana, thank you very much. And I hope you are doing well. I'm sorry I haven't called for a few days. I'll call you again. I hope your family, your children are taking care of you. Thank you. So, shall we break? John says, Dr. Bean, did you have to cook breakfast for your wife today? I wonder if this is some tradition my wife cooked up in my household. So, in my family, the person who has the birthday, they are the king for that day or queen for that day, and they can order anything to happen and we will do it. So they can say, I'm not cooking today, or I'm not going today, or I'm sitting here, you bring me water. So then everything happens. My wife had gone out with her pottery class today for the majority of the day, and they had lunch together and so on. Then she came back and we had a little ceremony and we did the baklava thing. So now she's watching TV and I'm here. So who did the breakfast? She did the breakfast, but she was the queen. She could have asked me to. She didn't. That is that is my message, and I approve it. Mariachi says, how do antibodies against nucleocapsid protein protect from infection? So, nucleocapsid protein is the viral protein that wraps around the viral RNA. And so, when the virus is, you know, presented, the antigens are presented on the cell surfaces, and the antibodies are going to attack those cells that are showing pieces of nucleocapsid proteins. Because those proteins are being made inside the cell, then that cell will be destroyed. So, viral factory is destroyed. Diversity says your wife makes pottery. Yeah, so if you see in the back that little swan and those all those rounded things, these are her made pottery. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Yep. So we are going to San Francisco tomorrow so that I can float her a lunch. So that is the ceremony. That is what how we'll celebrate. So with this, thank you very much. Please like, subscribe, and share. In the description, there are links to support this work if you would like to support this work. And you can buy me a coffee or PayPal, or you can become a member of Patreon, Substack, or even a member of this channel as well. Alquin. Okay. I will watch out. So thank you very much. Have a great weekend, and I would see you on Monday. Bye bye for now.